There exists a threshold in human existence that most men cross without recognition. You stand at that threshold now. The ancient Stoics understood something profound about time. It is not the enemy of man. Your 40s are not a decline into irrelevance, but rather the proving ground where every decision you... This is not a motivational sermon. This is not a collection of platitudes designed to make you feel momentarily inspired. What you are about to receive is a comprehensive manual for the most critical decade of your existence. By the end of this journey, you will possess a framework for transforming your 40s from a passive slide. The mathematics of your existence are brutally simple. The average human lifespan, when stripped of statistical manipulation and wishful thinking, this means that at 40, you have not reached middle age as the comforting narrative suggests. You have in fact already passed it. The statistical midpoint occurred at 38.5 years. This is not pessimism. This is precision, and precision is the first requirement of mastery. What makes this decade different from all others is that it represents the final window of high. Your brain still possesses the capacity for significant rewiring. But this window is closing. Every day you spend in denial. Every week you postpone the difficult recalibration. You are moving backward, because the biological reality of aging does not pause for your readiness. The Romans had a concept called memento mori, the meditation on death not as morbidity, but as clarification. When you truly internalize that your remaining time is finite and diminishing, the question becomes singular and unavoidable. Will you design the architecture of your remaining years? Consider the divergence that occurs in this decade. Two men, identical in every measurable way at 39, will be unrecognizable from one another at 50. One will have descended into metabolic chaos, his body a stranger to him. The other will have undergone a metamorphosis, his physicality enhanced beyond his younger self. The difference between these two trajectories is not genetics, not luck, not privilege. It is the accumulation of daily choices, each seemingly insignificant. Your 40s will determine whether you enter your 60s and 70s as a vital. This is the choice that stands before you, though it masquerades as 1,000 smaller choices about what you... The chronological reality demands acknowledgement. At 40, you have approximately 14,600 days remaining if you reach average life. This number should not comfort you with its seeming abundance. Each of those days will pass with increasing velocity, a psychological phenomenon well documented in temporal. Your experience of time accelerates as familiar patterns dominate your daily existence. The years ahead will seem to compress. Months will blur into seasons. What amplifies this urgency is the biological reality of decline. Without intervention, you will lose approximately 1% of your muscle mass per year after 40. Your testosterone will decline at a rate of 1 to 2% annually. Your bone density will diminish. Your metabolic rate will slow. Your cognitive processing speed will decrease. Your sleep quality will deteriorate. These are not possibilities contingent on bad behavior. These are default outcomes that occur even with average behavior. To maintain your current state requires above-average behavior. To improve requires exceptional behavior. But here is the paradox that most men fail to grasp until it is too late. The effort required to prevent decline is a fraction of the effort required to reverse it. The man who maintains his strength training through his 40s performs the same workout that the man who manages his metabolic health in his 40s with dietary discipline spares himself the... This is the economic principle applied to biology. Pay now or pay later. Every year you postpone the recalibration multiplies the difficulty of the eventual correction. The body keeps accounts, and compound interest works in both directions. The critical insight that separates the men who thrive in this decade from those who merely survive is this: they are about fighting the stories you tell yourself about age. The narrative of inevitable decline is a social construction, not a biological imperative. Yes, certain changes are unavoidable, but the vast majority of what we associate with aging is actually the result of disuse, poor nutrition. These are all modifiable factors. Every single one of them responds to intervention. The path forward requires a fundamental reorientation of your relationship with discomfort. Comfort is the aesthetic of death. The body adapts to the demands placed upon it. And if you demand nothing, it will provide nothing. If you seek comfort in your food choices, your physical activity, your social interactions, Discomfort, strategically applied and recovered from, is the signal that tells your biology to adapt. This is why the man who has spent his 30s avoiding difficulty will find his 40s unbearable. He has no practice with voluntary hardship. He has no reservoir of resilience. He has not built the psychological infrastructure that makes sustained effort possible. Meanwhile, the man who has been titrating doses of difficulty throughout his life. Now we will examine the specific domains that require your attention. Each element builds upon the others, creating a comprehensive system for not merely surviving your 40s. The first domain is the foundation upon which all else is constructed. Without this foundation, every other ambition becomes theoretical. With it, possibilities expand in ways that seem almost magical to those who have not experienced the E. Your relationship with alcohol must be examined with absolute honesty. The concept of empty calories is a dangerous understatement when applied to ethanol. Alcohol does not simply provide calories without nutrition. It actively disrupts every system it touches. Each episode of consumption, regardless of quantity, imposes a metabolic tax that extends 3 to 4 days. Your sleep architecture fractures. Your protein synthesis diminishes. Your cognitive function dulls. Your emotional regulation deteriorates. Your testosterone production suppresses. Your cortisol elevates. Your gut microbiome shifts toward dysbiosis. This is not moralizing, this is biochemistry. The man who drinks 3 times per week is never operating at full capacity. He exists in a perpetual state of partial recovery, never quite reaching baseline before the next insult. Over months and years, this creates a new baseline of diminished function that he mistakenly attributes to the clarity, energy, and mental sharpness he remembers from his 20s were not solely products of youth. They were products of a system not chronically burdened by a neurotoxin. Consider the executive who prides himself on his 3-drink evenings as a ritual of sophistication. He does not connect the afternoon brain fog, the difficulty with complex problem solving. He attributes each symptom to stress, to age, to circumstances. But remove the alcohol for 90 days and watch each symptom reverse. The fog lifts. Problems that seemed intractable become solvable. Patience with family members returns. Sexual function improves. Body composition shifts without other interventions. This is not speculation. This is the documented experience of thousands who have conducted this experiment on themselves. The measurement of your physical state must become systematic, not occasional. What remains unmeasured remains unmanaged, and what remains unmanaged drifts toward entropy. The scale is not your enemy. It is a feedback mechanism. Daily weighing, recorded and graphed over weeks, reveals patterns that single measurements cannot. The sudden spike after a restaurant meal teaches you about sodium and water retention. The gradual upward trend over 2 weeks reveals that your caloric intake exceeds your expenditure by. The plateau that persists despite your efforts signals the need for protocol adjustment. But the scale tells only the beginning of the story. The tape measure around your waist provides a more accurate picture of metabolic health than any bathroom. Waist circumference correlates directly with visceral fat. A man can maintain stable weight while his waist expands. Measure monthly at the same time of day under the same conditions. Track the data. When the trend moves in the wrong direction, you possess early warning rather than discovering the problem. The comprehensive blood panel every 6 months is your window into the systems that operate beneath conscious. Fasting glucose reveals your insulin sensitivity. Hemoglobin A1C shows your average blood sugar over 3 months. Your lipid panel, particularly the triglyceride to HDL ratio, inflammatory markers like high sensitivity, C-reactive protein, indicate systemic inflammation that accelerates. Vitamin D levels reveal a deficiency that impacts everything from immune function to mood regulation. Testosterone, both total and free, explains energy levels, muscle maintenance, and cognitive function. These numbers are not abstract. They are the control panel of your biology, and learning to read them transforms you from a passenger into a. The man who discovers his fasting glucose at 105 has received a gift. Ignore this number, and he progresses to type 2 diabetes. Address it now with carbohydrate restriction and exercise, and he restores insulin sensitivity. But here is where most men stumble. They confuse aesthetic health with actual health. The mirror lies through omission. A man can appear fit, maintain visible musculature, and possess low body fat while his internal biomarkers, Visceral fat accumulates around organs without external visibility. Blood pressure elevates without symptoms until the stroke or heart attack. Arterial plaque builds silently until the blockage becomes critical. Liver fat accumulates despite a lean appearance, progressing toward non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. The assumption that looking healthy equals being healthy has killed men in their 40s and 50s with, "This is why the protocol must include both the visible and the invisible." You must tend to the aesthetics, yes, because they reflect discipline and provide psychological benefit. But you must also monitor the biochemistry, the hidden variables that will determine whether you experience The training of your muscular system is non-negotiable, and its importance amplifies with each passing year. Resistance training is not about vanity at this stage. It is about survival and independence. Muscle mass is the organ of longevity. It serves as a glucose disposal site, improving insulin sensitivity with each contraction. It secretes myokines, anti-inflammatory compounds that protect against disease. It maintains bone density through mechanical stress. It preserves metabolic rate, preventing the downward spiral of declining caloric needs leading to fat gain. It enables functional movement, reducing injury risk and maintaining independence in later decades. The man who ceases resistance training in his 40s accelerates every aging process. His testosterone declines faster, without the stimulus that signals its necessity. His bone density decreases, setting the stage for osteoporosis. His metabolic rate drops, making fat gain easier and fat loss harder. His posture deteriorates as supporting musculature weakens. His balance diminishes, increasing fall risk. His confidence erodes as physical capability declines. This cascade begins subtly, but compounds relentlessly. 3 to 4 sessions per week, focusing on compound movements that engage multiple muscle groups. The squat, deadlift, press, and row variations form the foundation. Progressive overload, the systematic increase in weight or repetitions over time, ensures continued adaptation. The exact program matters less than consistency and the principle of progressive tension. The man who shows up weekly for years will surpass the man with the optimal program who trains sporadically. But training creates demand. The demand must be met with supply, and that supply is nutrition. The dominance over your food choices is where self-mastery begins. 3 to 4 times daily you choose. Will this meal move me toward my goals or away from them? The accumulation of these choices over weeks creates your body composition. Over months it creates your health markers. Over years it creates your aging trajectory. Protein intake deserves primary focus because it is the most satiating macronutrient. The target of 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight ensures adequate amino acid availability. For a 200-pound man, this means 160 to 200 grams daily. This is not easily achieved through casual eating. It requires planning, tracking, and consistency. The structure of 3 substantial meals, rather than constant grazing. Insulin, the storage hormone, spikes with each feeding opportunity. Constant elevation of insulin creates insulin resistance, the root of metabolic dysfunction. Spacing meals by 4 to 6 hours allows insulin to return to baseline between feedings. This also creates mild periods of fasting that trigger cellular cleanup processes called autophagy. The sleep you achieve tonight will determine your performance tomorrow more than any other single factor. Sleep is not rest. It is active biological maintenance. During deep sleep, your brain clears metabolic waste through the glymphatic system. Growth hormone pulses, facilitating muscle repair and fat metabolism. Memories consolidate from short-term to long-term storage. Emotional experiences are processed and integrated. Testosterone production occurs primarily during sleep. Immune function strengthens. Insulin sensitivity improves. The destruction of sleep quality is the fastest path to accelerated aging. Sleep deprivation, even mild chronic sleep restriction to 6 hours nightly, creates a cascade of dysfunction. Cortisol remains elevated. Ghrelin, the hunger hormone, increases, while leptin, the satiety hormone, decreases, driving overeating. Glucose metabolism deteriorates, even in healthy individuals. Testosterone production drops. Cognitive function across all domains diminishes. Emotional regulation fails. The risk of cardiovascular events increases. The development of neurodegenerative disease accelerates. Creating the sanctuary for sleep requires treating it as the highest priority rather than what you do with The room must be cool, ideally 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. It must be dark. Not just dim, but completely dark, as even small amounts of light disrupt melatonin. Consider blackout curtains and covering all electronic lights. It must be quiet, or masked with consistent white noise that blocks sporadic sounds. The mattress and pillows must support proper spinal alignment. These are not luxuries. These are requirements. The hours before sleep matter as much as the sleep environment. Blue light from screens suppresses melatonin production, delaying sleep onset and reducing sleep quality. The content consumed before bed affects dream content and sleep continuity. Stimulating, stressful, or emotionally charged material fragments sleep. Alcohol, despite its sedative effect, prevents entry into deep sleep stages and causes multiple awakenings. Caffeine consumed even 6 hours before bed significantly impacts sleep quality. The protocol is straightforward, but requires discipline. Cease caffeine consumption after 2 in the afternoon. Cease food consumption 3 hours before sleep, as late eating disrupts sleep through digestive activity. And cease screen exposure 1 hour before bed, replacing it with reading physical books. Conversation. Enter the bedroom only when ready to sleep, preserving it as a space associated with rest rather than work, or maintain consistent sleep and wake times, even on weekends, to stabilize circadian rhythms. The movement of your body throughout the day. Separate from structured exercise. The research is unambiguous. Walking 8,000 to 10,000 steps daily reduces all-cause mortality. This is not about fitness. This is about interrupting prolonged sitting, maintaining joint mobility, facilitating lymphatic drainage. For the man with a sedentary occupation, this requires strategic intervention. The treadmill desk transforms work time into movement time. Walking meetings replace seated meetings. Parking at the far end of parking lots, taking stairs instead of elevators, walking during phone calls. The resistance to this comes from the false belief that exercise compensates for sitting. It does not. You cannot exercise your way out of a sedentary lifestyle. A man who trains intensely for 1 hour, but sits for the remaining 15 waking hours, still suffers. The practice of mobility, distinct from flexibility, maintains your ability to move through full ranges of. Tight hips create compensatory patterns that stress the lower back. Restricted thoracic spine mobility forces excessive movement from the lumbar spine. Ankle immobility alters gait mechanics, creating knee and hip pathology. Shoulder restrictions lead to neck strain and headaches. These restrictions accumulate gradually, unnoticed until the day they manifest as acute pain or injury. Mobility work, 10 to 15 minutes daily, prevents this accumulation. Hip flexor stretches counteract sitting. Thoracic rotations maintain spinal mobility. Ankle dorsiflexion drills preserve gait quality. Shoulder dislocations with a band restore overhead range of motion. The cost is minimal. The benefit is decades of pain-free movement. Yet most men ignore mobility until injury forces attention. Cardiovascular training must be reframed from obligation to exploration. The man who forces himself through running when he detests running will not sustain the practice. But every man can find a modality that provides cardiovascular stimulus while also delivering enjoyment. Or swimming offers full-body conditioning with zero impact. Cycling builds leg strength while covering distance. Basketball provides intervals naturally through game flow. Surfing demands paddle strength and balance. Hiking combines nature exposure with elevation changes. The specific activity matters less than finding something sustainable. The minimum effective dose for cardiovascular health is approximately 150 minutes per week of. This can be structured as 3 50-minute sessions, 5 30-minute sessions. The key is elevating heart rate sufficiently to create adaptation without exceeding recovery capacity. For most men in their 40s, this means training at approximately 70 to 80% of maximum heart. But the greatest error is believing more is always better. Excessive cardiovascular training elevates cortisol chronically, suppresses testosterone. The man who runs daily for 90 minutes while also restricting calories and managing high stress he may be lean, but he is not healthy. He has confused one marker of fitness with comprehensive health. Balance is not a compromise, it is the optimization function. Supplementation should be approached with skepticism and precision. The industry profits from convincing you that pills replace behaviors. They do not. But certain supplements address genuine deficiencies, or provide benefits difficult to achieve through food. Vitamin D is deficient in the majority of the population. It functions more like a hormone than a vitamin, influencing immune function, bone health, mood. The target blood level is 50 to 70 nanograms per milliliter. Omega-3 fatty acids, specifically EPA and DHA from fish oil, they support cardiovascular health, brain function, and mood regulation. The research supports 1 to 2 grams of combined EPA and DHA daily. Quality matters more than cost, as oxidized fish oil provides no benefit and potential harm. Look for products that are third-party tested and stored properly. Magnesium is deficient in approximately half the population due to soil depletion and dietary patterns. It participates in over 300 enzymatic reactions, influences sleep quality, reduces muscle cramping. Magnesium glycinate is the preferred form due to superior absorption and minimal gastrointestinal distress. 300 to 400 milligrams before bed improves sleep quality while addressing the deficiency. A comprehensive multivitamin serves as insurance against dietary gaps. It should contain methylated B vitamins, adequate zinc and selenium. Think of it as a safety net, not a foundation. Creatine monohydrate is the most researched supplement in existence. 5 grams daily, timing irrelevant, saturates muscle creatine stores. This improves strength and power output, accelerates recovery, and provides neuroprotective effects. The myths about kidney damage and hair loss in healthy individuals have been thoroughly debunked. The cost is negligible, the benefit is measurable. Everything else, the exotic compounds promising miraculous results. The supplement industry is largely unregulated. Quality varies dramatically. Build your protocol on the foundations listed above. Experiment with additional compounds only after mastering the basics and only with products from reputable. Now we must confront a domain that most men neglect until crisis forces attention. Time with your children operates under a cruel mathematical reality that most fathers fail to recognize until the years of high parental influence compress into a narrow window. By the time your child reaches 18, you have spent approximately 93% of the in-person. This statistic should create urgency, not paralysis. The father who postpones presence until the business is established, until the financial goals are met, the opportunity to shape their foundational beliefs, to model behavior patterns. You do not get to revisit their 8th year after you've finished building your empire. The 8th year happens once in real time, regardless of your readiness or availability. But the depth of impact extends beyond mere presence. Children do not primarily learn from what you say. They learn from what you do, what you prioritize, how you respond to stress, how you treat your partner. Your life is their instruction manual for how to be an adult. The patterns you exhibit become their definition of normal. This is not metaphorical. This is psychological imprinting that occurs largely below the conscious level. Consider the father who chronically overeats, who uses food as emotional regulation. He may never explicitly teach his children this pattern, but they absorb it through observation. When stress arrives, they turn to food. When celebration arrives, they turn to food. Food becomes intertwined with emotion rather than fuel. By the time they reach adulthood, this pattern is so deeply embedded that it feels like personality rather. Reversing it requires years of conscious effort and often professional intervention. The same principle applies across all domains. The father who manages money poorly, who lives in constant financial stress, the father who cannot regulate his emotions, who oscillates between withdrawal and explosion, the father who treats his partner with contempt or indifference teaches his children that this is how intimate. The programming happens automatically, without intention, through simple exposure. But this reality contains both danger and opportunity. You can consciously use your behavior as the curriculum for their development. Every time you choose the difficult right action over the easy wrong action while they are watching, every time you maintain your exercise routine despite not wanting to, every time you speak respectfully to your partner during disagreement, every time you acknowledge your error and apologize, you are teaching them that integrity includes owning. This is leadership through demonstration, the most powerful form of education available. It requires no lectures, no explicit lessons, no forced conversations about values. It simply requires you to live according to the principles you want them to embody. The father who maintains this standard for 18 years will launch an adult who possesses an internalized. The father who neglects this responsibility will launch an adult who must spend years or decades unlearning. The concept of generational curses, though often described in religious or mystical terms, trauma, addiction, financial dysfunction, emotional dysregulation, the son of an alcoholic father is at significantly higher risk of developing alcoholism. The daughter of a mother with disordered eating develops her own complicated relationship with food through. Your responsibility, should you choose to accept it, is to identify the dysfunctional patterns you inherited. This requires brutal honesty about your own behaviors, the willingness to seek help when patterns prove. You are the generation that stops the cycle. Your children and their children will benefit from work you do now to heal yourself and model health. But the relationship that provides the foundation for your children's development of relationship skills is the quality of this relationship, the respect you demonstrate, the affection you maintain. They will seek partners who recreate the familiar dynamics they observed. The practice of daily appreciation prevents the erosion that occurs through inattention. Relationships do not fail through dramatic betrayal as often as through slow neglect. The thousand small moments of choosing work over connection, screen over conversation. Once sufficient distance exists, repair becomes difficult because neither party remembers what connection felt. The prevention is simpler than the cure. Express specific appreciation daily. Not generic platitudes, but concrete observations of what your partner did that day that made life better. Notice the unseen labor, the tasks that maintain household function that often go unacknowledged. Maintain physical affection independent of sexual initiation. Touch communicates connection that words cannot. Prioritize time together without children, without screens, without agenda. Protect the relationship from the corrosive effects of chronic busyness and the assumption that it will cool. Your children will learn about love by watching how you love your partner. They will learn about respect by watching how you respect your partner. They will learn about forgiveness by watching how you repair ruptures. They will learn about commitment by watching you choose the relationship repeatedly. This education happens silently, constantly, with far more power than any conversation about relationships. We must now examine the mental models that will guide your decision-making through this decade and beyond. The majority of poor decisions stem not from malicious intent, but from flawed thinking patterns that go. The sunk cost fallacy destroys more lives than almost any other cognitive error. This is the tendency to continue investing in something because you have already invested in it. The career that no longer aligns with your values, but that you stay in because you've invested 15 years. The business that bleeds money and joy, but that you prop up because you've invested your savings. The friendship that has become toxic, but that you maintain because of shared history. The project that clearly will not succeed, but that you pursue because you've already invested months. The fundamental error is treating past investment as relevant to future decision-making. It is not. Past investment is gone, irrecoverable, sunk. The only question that matters is, given where I am now, given what I know now, if the answer does not include continuing the current path, then the appropriate action is to stop immediately. Every additional day you spend on a dead end is another day not spent on something that could actually work. Time is the ultimate non-renewable resource. Money can be earned again, reputation can be rebuilt. Health can often be restored, but time once spent is gone. The man who remains in the wrong career from 40 to 50 has not just wasted 10 years. He has wasted the best 10 years of his career, the decade when his experience and energy converge to create. He cannot recover those years. He can only mourn them while trying to make better choices with the years that remain. The application of constraints is a paradoxical principle that most men resist until they experience its power. We assume that unlimited options produce optimal outcomes, that removing constraints frees us to achieve more. The opposite is true. Constraints force prioritization. They eliminate the diffusion of energy across too many targets. They create focus, and focus is the mechanism of achievement. Consider the entrepreneur who pursues every opportunity, who cannot say no to interesting projects. He believes he is maximizing opportunity. In reality, he is guaranteeing mediocrity across all 6 ventures because none receive the sustained attention. Compare him to the entrepreneur who constrains himself to one venture. Over a decade, the focused entrepreneur builds something substantial. The diffused entrepreneur builds nothing complete. Apply this to your personal life. The man who tries to maintain his career while also maximizing family time, while also training for an... He has not applied constraints. He has deluded himself into believing he can have everything simultaneously. The result is constant guilt about what he's neglecting, mediocre performance in all domains, chronic stress. The man who applies constraints says, "For this season, these 3 things are my priorities: career, family, health. Everything else gets minimal attention or gets declined." This creates guilt initially, because people are disappointed, because opportunities are missed. But it creates the possibility of excellence in the chosen domains. The evaluation of second and third order consequences separates strategic thinkers from reactive actors. Most people evaluate decisions based solely on first-order consequences, the immediate obvious results. This is why they repeatedly make choices that provide short-term satisfaction but long-term damage. The decision to consume alcohol provides immediate pleasure, relaxation, social lubrication. These are first-order consequences. But the second-order consequences are disrupted sleep, reduced cognitive function the following day. The third-order consequences, compounded over years, are dependence, compromised health, and reduced lifespan. The man who evaluates only first-order consequences sees no reason to stop. The man who traces the causal chain to its endpoints sees that the trade is unfavorable. This principle applies across all decisions. The choice to work late instead of attending your child's event has the first-order consequence of completed. The second-order consequence is your child's disappointment and the small erosion of your relationship. The third-order consequence, repeated over years, is a child who stops inviting you to events because they... The man who evaluates only first-order consequences makes the same choice repeatedly. The man who traces consequences understands the true cost and makes a different choice. Before making any significant decision, force yourself to map the causal chain. What happens immediately? What happens as a result of that? What happens as a result of that? Follow the logic forward at least 3 steps. This practice will prevent the majority of decisions you later regret. The composition of your social circle in your 40s will determine whether you remain intellectually alive. There is a dangerous tendency to surround yourself exclusively with age peers. This creates an echo chamber that reinforces existing beliefs and prevents the exposure to new ideas. That the deliberate inclusion of younger people in your circle provides access to emerging trends, new technologies. The discomfort this creates is the signal of growth. When a 25-year-old challenges your belief about career progression or relationship dynamics, or simultaneously, maintaining relationships with people older than you provides mentorship. The man in his 60s who has navigated the decade you are entering can provide guidance that prevents errors. The man in his 70s can describe what mattered in retrospect versus what seemed important at the time. The optimal social circle includes representation across generations, across industries, across worldviews. This prevents the ossification of belief that characterizes those who surround themselves exclusively with "your beliefs should be stress-tested regularly, your assumptions should be challenged, your worldview should evolve as new information arrives." This only happens when you deliberately create conditions for intellectual friction. We now enter the territory of vision and purpose, the domain where most men fail not through lack of effort. The collapse of the traditional retirement model represents both crisis and opportunity. The old narrative of working until 65 and then ceasing productive activity is dying. The research on retirement outcomes is stark. Men who retire and cease purposeful activity show accelerated cognitive decline, increased rates of depression, the abrupt cessation of work, of social connection, of purpose, of routine. They have spent 40 years defining themselves by their occupation, and when that identity is removed, the question, "What do you do?" becomes unanswerable in retirement. But the alternative is not to work at a job you hate for the rest of your life. It is to engineer a transition toward work that you can sustain indefinitely, because it provides meaning. The goal is not retirement from productivity. It is graduation into the highest form of work, the work you would choose to do even if you did not need the E. This requires thinking in time horizons. Where do you want to be in 1 year? What needs to be true for that to happen? What actions must you take this quarter to make progress? Where do you want to be in 3 years? What capabilities must you develop? What relationships must you build? What must you learn? Where do you want to be in 5 years? What becomes possible if you execute the 1-year and 3-year plans successfully? Most men have no vision beyond vague aspirations. They want to be healthy, successful, happy. These are not visions, these are wishes. A vision is specific. It includes details about how you spend your time, what your days look like, who you interact with. A vision creates pull, drawing you toward it through attraction rather than pushing you through discipline. Without a vision, you are vulnerable to living someone else's vision for your life. Your employer has a vision for how you should spend your time, and it maximizes their benefit, not yours. Your family has expectations that may not align with your authentic desires. Society has a template for what a man in his 40s should be doing, and it may be completely wrong for you. If you do not articulate your own vision and defend it, you will default to fulfilling external expectations. The creation of vision requires solitude and honesty. You must separate what you genuinely want from what you think you should want, what would impress others. This is harder than it sounds because most of us have been performing for external validation so long that the question is not what would look impressive, but what would I do if no one was watching and money was not? Once you have clarity on vision, the gap between current reality and desired future becomes your strategic. What is the smallest action you can take today that moves you toward the vision? What habits need to be established? What habits need to be eliminated? What skills need to be developed? What relationships need to be initiated or deepened? What relationships need to be ended or attenuated? Progress on vision requires the courage to disappoint people. You will have to say no to requests that do not serve your vision. You will have to extract yourself from commitments that made sense in a previous season, but no longer align. You will have to spend time on activities that others view as selfish or confusing. This is the price of living intentionally rather than reactively. The most important distinction in status seeking is between real status and rented status. Real status is earned through developing yourself into someone genuinely valuable, someone with skills. Rented status is purchased through consumption, displaying expensive items that signal wealth or taste, but our culture has confused these categories catastrophically. A man driving a luxury car he cannot afford, living in a house that stretches his finances, he does not. He has debt and insecurity dressed up as success. The moment the income stops, the entire facade collapses because it was never real. It was rented and the rent came due. True status, the kind that cannot be taken from you, is a body that functions optimally because you have. It is a mind that thinks clearly because you have read deeply and avoided the toxins that cloud cognition. It is a family that wants to spend time with you because you invested in those relationships. It is a skill set that people pay for because you developed mastery. It is a character that people trust because you have been honest even when honesty was costly. These forms of status are not purchased. They are built through daily choices over years. The supreme irony is that real status often manifests in ways invisible to status seekers. The man with rented status seeks recognition from strangers through visible consumption. The man with real status does not need external validation because he knows his own value. He may drive a modest car because he does not need the car to communicate his worth. He may wear simple clothes because he is not using clothing to create an identity. His status is internal and therefore secure. In your 40s, redirect your status seeking from consumption to construction. Build your body. Build your mind. Build your relationships. Build your skills. These investments compound over time, unlike purchased items that depreciate. 20 years from now, the man who spent his resources on real status will have capabilities and relationships. The man who spent his resources on rented status will have nothing but photographs of things he used to own. The ultimate objective of your remaining life must shift from accumulation to contribution. The tragic model of retirement as endless leisure, as a reward for decades of work. We are built for purposeful struggle. We need problems to solve. We need ways to be useful. We need to know that our existence matters. This is why the revised model of longevity is not about stopping, but about continuing in the highest form of the craftsman who maintains his workshop into his 80s because he still finds joy in creating. The consultant who advises younger professionals because his accumulated wisdom prevents them from repeating. The volunteer who serves his community because he has time and skills to contribute. These men remain vital, engaged, mentally sharp, and emotionally fulfilled. The preparation for this phase begins now in your 40s. This intersection is where you should be directing your career trajectory. The income must be sufficient, but beyond sufficiency, The marginal utility of additional money decreases. Ask yourself, what do I want to be doing at 75? If the answer is playing golf and watching television, you have aimed too low. If the answer involves using your lifetime of accumulated knowledge to serve others, to create something, the skills you develop in your 40s will be your assets in your 70s. The relationships you build now will be your network then. The reputation you construct through consistent character will be your currency. The quality of your life is the quality of your thoughts. Garbage in, garbage out. This principle applies to information consumption with particular force. The media you consume, the conversations you participate in, the content you allow into your consciousness. The man who begins his day by consuming news designed to provoke outrage and fear will carry that emotional. The man who scrolls social media for hours, comparing his reality to curated highlight reels. The man who consumes primarily entertainment that requires no thought will watch his attention span, and the inputs matter. This does not mean ignorance of world events or isolation from culture. It means curation. It means being selective about sources, about timing, about quantity. It means choosing content that informs rather than inflames, that educates rather than merely entertains. It means protecting your attention as the precious resource it is rather than allowing it to be harvested by. Your current reality is the output of your past thoughts and decisions. If you are unsatisfied with your current reality, trace it backward to the thoughts that generated the. What beliefs are you holding that produce the actions that produce your current circumstances? This is where intervention becomes possible. You cannot change your circumstances directly through wishing or willpower alone, but you can change your thoughts. New thoughts generate new behaviors generate new results. The leverage point is consciousness, awareness of the thought patterns that run automatically. The man who believes he is too old to change careers will not explore options. The man who believes relationships cannot improve after they have deteriorated will not invest in repair. The man who believes his health decline is inevitable will not resist it. These beliefs, none of which are necessarily true, become self-fulfilling prophecies because they determine. Challenge your limiting beliefs. Where did they come from? What evidence supports them? What evidence contradicts them? Are they serving you or limiting you? You stand now at the crossroads. Behind you, the accumulation of choices that brought you here. Ahead, the compression of remaining time that will reveal what you are made of and what you value. This decade, your 40s, will not give you the luxury of indecision. It will force you to choose. Will you design or drift? Will you build or decay? Will you lead or follow? Will you become or simply age? The transformation available to you is not theoretical. It has been achieved by thousands before you and will be achieved by thousands after you. But it will not happen passively. It requires the honest assessment of where you are, the clear vision of where you want to be. You now possess the framework, the knowledge of what must be measured and managed in your physical vessel, the understanding of how to move, eat, sleep, and train, the awareness of how your family relationships shape the next generation, the mental models to guide better decisions, the vision for a life that remains purposeful beyond arbitrary age markers. Knowledge without application is entertainment. You have been entertained. Now comes the more difficult part, implementation. The test is not whether you understand these principles. The test is whether you will apply them tomorrow morning when the alarm sounds, whether you will choose the difficult right action over the comfortable wrong action, whether you will maintain consistency when results are not yet visible, whether you will prioritize long-term vision over short-term gratification. The man you will become in your 50s, 60s, and beyond is being constructed right now. Every decision is a vote for the type of person you are becoming. You are not stuck with the results of your past votes. You can change the trajectory starting immediately, but you must start, and you must sustain. The knowledge is yours, the choice is yours, the time is now.